Amid the echoes of tradition, precision meets conversation. Welcome to the Clarity Professor Podcast.
Hi, I'm Anthony Sakovich, and this is the Clarity Professor Podcast. Welcome to the show. I'll be your storyteller today. And this is going to be quite a story, I have to tell you. I was so excited researching this one because the more details I found, the more important it became to the message that I always try to get out there about know your axiom, because it's, before anything else starts, the axiom has to be in place. So let's see what happens. Once upon a time, there were two brothers who went off to college together. They brought the usual things: clothes, typewriters, return labels for care packages from home. But the one thing that both of them brought for sure, the things that mattered most, was their books. They loved their books. Louis, the older brother, he was an idealist. He majored in English literature because books weren't just something he enjoyed. They were the thing worth studying. He spent his afternoons in the stacks, his evenings reading, his weekends hunting for titles no one else had heard of. Now Tom, the younger, he also loved books just as much, but he chose a different path in the way that younger siblings often do. He studied business. He stayed in the liberal arts and humanities side of business, but he aimed for something more practical: markets and people and how to organize them. There was something else the brothers brought with them to the University of Michigan in 1971, a knowledge of a problem. Not a theory, not an observation, a problem they had lived with their entire reading lives. One so persistent and so personal that most people had stopped noticing it was even there. And even if they did notice, they assumed there was no way to solve it. It was the brothers' deep personal awareness of this problem that would drive their little dream through the roofs of academia, through the skepticism of an entire industry, and all the way to a $4 billion a year business that would eventually forget what that problem ever was. The problem was simple. Bookstores had no idea what was on their own shelves. If you walk into any bookstore in 1971 and ask for a specific title, not a bestseller, not something highlighted up at the front table, but something specific, a novel by an author you'd read about in a review, a technical manual on a narrow subject, a collection of essays from 10 years ago, the clerk would probably look at you, then look at the shelves, then shrug, or guess, or walk you over to a section and wave vaguely at 300 titles and say, if we have it, it'd be somewhere in here. Most of the time you left empty-handed. Not because the book wasn't there. Sometimes it was. It was put in backwards. It was 2 rows away, filed under the wrong category or the wrong author because someone had put it back on the shelf in the wrong place 6 months ago, and no one had noticed. The inventory system, if you can even call it that, lived in someone's memory or on hand-scribbled index cards in a drawer behind the register. Or it didn't exist at all. Bookstores in 1971 were beautiful, but they were impossible. Louis and Tom knew this in their bones. They'd lived it. Every hunt for an obscure title, every conversation with a clerk who meant well, but didn't know. Every drive to a second bookstore, a third bookstore, hoping someone somewhere had bothered to track what they actually carried. It was maddening. And one day, Louis decided to do something about it. He taught himself to program. In 1971, that was like teaching yourself alchemy. Computers existed, but barely. Mainframes in university basements. The punch cards, Fortran, COBOL, APL? No, actually they didn't have an APL yet. They had machines the size of rooms that could barely do arithmetic without overheating. Now here was an English literature major, someone who spent his days reading Chaucer and Joyce. He was learning to speak to machines. Not because he loved machines, but because he loved books. He realized something no one else in the book business had realized yet. Computers could remember things people can't. They could track every title, every author, every subject, every time something sold, every time someone asked for something that wasn't there. A computer could know what was on the shelves. And if it knew what was on the shelves, it could help people find things. That was the insight. Not, let's build a bookstore, but let's build a system that knows where the books are. Lewis wrote the code. Tom handled the business side. And in 1971, the brothers opened their first store in Ann Arbor. But the first thing they built wasn't the store. It was the database, a computerized inventory system that tracked every title they carried, subjects, authors, availability, sales trends. The system learned what sold and what didn't. It remembered what customers asked for. It told the brothers what to order, what to stock, what to let go. Then they built the store around it. When customers walked in, they didn't wander aimlessly, hoping to stumble on the right book. They asked, and the brothers could answer. Do you have this? Yes, aisle 4, third shelf, between these 2 other titles. Do you carry anything on this subject? Yes. Here are 6 books. 2 are in stock. 4 we can order and have here in a week. It felt like magic, because in 1971 it was. The store grew, not because it was bigger or prettier or cheaper than other bookstores, but because you could find things there. Students came, professors came, but mostly book lovers came. People who'd spent years hunting for obscure texts and coming up empty finally had a place where someone could actually help them. The database made it possible. The brothers weren't just selling books. They were solving for discovery. And discovery, it turned out, was valuable. Through the late 70s and into the 80s, the brothers expanded. More stores, bigger catalogs, deeper inventory. Every new store fed data back to the system. Every sale taught the database something. Every search refined it. Competitors tried to copy the model, but they couldn't. They saw the stores and missed the machines. They thought the magic was in the layout, the selection, the customer service. No, the magic was in the code. Lewis and Tom had built something rare, a system that got smarter the bigger it became. Every store made the system better. Every customer made it sharper. Every transaction fed the oracle. They weren't just running bookstores. They were running a discovery engine that happened to use bookstores as its interface. And for nearly 2 decades, that clarity held. Don't forget, like and subscribe. So like I said, for 2 decades, they held on to their clarity. They held on to their axiom. The brothers expanded carefully through the 80s, adding more locations across the Midwest. Each new store fed data back into the system. The database learned faster, got sharper, and knew more. By now, you've probably guessed the name, or maybe you remember the stores yourself. The cafes, the blue carpet with yellow stars in the children's section, the 2-story flagship stores with escalators. The company was Borders. By 1989, it was ready to become something much bigger. The brothers hired Robert DiRimaldo. I think I'm saying that name right, but it's what I'm going to go with for right now. He can always message me. He was a retail executive with a track record of explosive growth. He had taken Hickory Farms, you remember Hickory Farms, from a handful of stores to over 1,000 locations across the United States and Canada. His first order of business for Borders was expansion. Over the next 3 years, he opened 14 new stores. Then more, then more. The database scaled beautifully. Every new store made the system smarter. Every transaction taught it something. Every search refined the algorithm. The brothers had built something that got better the bigger it became. By the early 90s, the company wasn't just a regional bookstore chain anymore. It was becoming a national force. In 1992, Kmart noticed. Gosh, remember Kmart? Major competitor to Walmart. Kmart was one of the largest retailers in America. Thousands of stores, billions in revenue, selling everything from clothing and hardware to groceries and electronics, tire change, oil change, you name it. Everything you know about Walmart was also in Kmart. Except Walmart never had the blue light special. Attention, Kmart shoppers. Yes, we all remember that one. See, Kmart wanted books. So they just acquired Borders outright. The bookstore that had started with a database and a dream had become a subsidiary inside a retail empire. To Kmart, it made perfect sense. The bookstore chain was profitable, growing fast, and had strong brand recognition across the country. The technology was impressive, sure, but the real asset was the stores, retail square footage, prime locations, lease agreements. Now, Lewis had already been removed from day-to-day management in 1988 after disagreement with the board, creative styles, and concerns about his leadership style as the company scaled. Tom stayed on after the acquisition, but in 1995 he left too. The company went public that same year under the ticker symbol BGP on the New York Stock Exchange. Both brothers were gone. The company was Borders Group Inc. now. It kept growing. Through the mid-90s and into the early 2000s, Borders expanded across the globe. Singapore in 1997 with a massive 32,000 square foot flagship at Wheelock Place. Then Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Malaysia, and the United Arab Emirates. By 2003, Borders operated over 1,200 stores worldwide. Superstores the size of warehouses, 2-story locations with escalators, downtown flagships, airport kiosks, suburban anchors in shopping centers from coast to coast. Each store carried tens of thousands of titles: literature, history, science, technical manuals, rare imports, niche subjects most bookstores wouldn't touch. The stores had cafes serving Starbucks coffee, music sections with listening stations, comfortable seating, free Wi-Fi, author events, book clubs. Borders wasn't just selling books anymore. It was selling a space, a destination, a third place between home and work, where people could sit, browse, read, linger. Teenagers hung out there after school. College students studied there. Parents brought their kids to story time on the cosmic blue carpet with yellow stars and rocket ships. People loved it. It was like a literary Chuck E. Cheese without the animatronics. Peak annual revenue climbed to $4 billion. Market cap hit $2 billion. The company employed over 19,000 people across the United States alone. Borders had become one of the most recognizable brands in American retail, synonymous with bookstores the way Kleenex was synonymous with tissues. It looked like success. It felt like success. By every visible measure, it was success. The stores were beautiful, if you remember them. I mean, the selection was vast. The experience was carefully curated. Customers kept coming. The database still ran in the background, tracking inventory across all 1,200 locations, processing orders, managing supply chains, feeding logistics systems that kept books flowing from publishers to warehouse to stores to customers. Yeah. It still worked, but something had changed. The database wasn't the product anymore. It had just become infrastructure, like plumbing or back office technology that supported the real business, which was operating bookstores. Nobody thought about it. Nobody talked about it. Nobody remembered why it had been built in the first place. The people running Borders in 2003 had never met Lewis. They had never watched him write code. They had never seen the system learn. They had inherited a bookstore chain with impressive technology. They didn't know they had inherited magic. Then the world changed. The internet had been around for years, but by the late 90s and early 2000s, it was becoming something different. Commerce, discovery, search. Online retailers offered infinite catalogs with no shelf space constraints and no geographic limits. You could search for any book ever printed and get an answer in seconds. It was discovery without walls. It should have been Borders' moment. They had pioneered computerized book search in 1971. They had spent 30 years teaching computers to help people find books. They had more data than any bookstore in history. Customer behavior, sales trends, search patterns, inventory optimization across 1,200 locations worldwide. Nobody was better positioned to own online book discovery than Borders. Putting their system on the internet should have been inevitable. It would have been the greatest transformation in retail history. A company that had spent 3 decades perfecting discovery in physical stores, now offering a platform where discovery had no physical limits. Amazon had started from scratch in 1994. Borders had been doing it since 1971. They should have crushed Amazon. But that would have required them remembering what their system was for. And by 2001, nobody at Borders remembered. The people running Borders hadn't built the database. They hadn't lived with the problem the brothers had lived with. They didn't understand that discovery was the whole point. They thought they were in the retail business. So when the question came, what do we do about online? The answer came from retail logic, not discovery engine logic. In 2001, Borders made a deal with Amazon. Amazon would handle Borders.com. Amazon would run the technology, the e-commerce platform, the logistics, the customer data, the search algorithms, the recommendation engine. Borders would focus on what it did best, operating stores. If you aren't seeing a shyster and patsy image here in your head, I feel sorry for you. Because it was announced as a strategic partnership, each company playing to its strengths. For a big box retailer, the decision made perfect sense. Reduce costs, focus resources, outsource the internet thing. For a discovery company, it was catastrophic. But Borders didn't see itself as a discovery company. It saw itself as a bookstore chain. And bookstore chains don't need to own search engines. That decision contained a confession Borders didn't know it was making. We are in the business of managing physical spaces that house books. But you see, that had never been true. Louis and Tom had never been in the real estate business. They had been in the magic business. The stores were just where the magic lived. The database was the enchantment. The system was their product. The buildings were only ever the interface. When Borders handed discovery to Amazon in 2001, they handed away the spell, the thing that had made everything else possible. We're not done yet. So go ahead, hit like, subscribe. If you want to watch this live, then go to clarityspecialist.com. You can register there and catch the live broadcast every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Let me get a drink. So, once Borders gave the database to someone else, the learning stopped. Amazon owned the search data. Amazon saw what customers looked for, what they clicked, what they bought, what they abandoned, what they returned, and what they returned for. Amazon's system learned. Its algorithms refined. Its recommendations improved. Its discovery got smarter every single day. Borders got none of that. Their stores kept selling books, but the stores stopped knowing things. The database that had once whispered insights, guided inventory decisions, made the brothers clairvoyant, went quiet. It still tracked what was on the shelves. It still processed orders. It still managed logistics. But it stopped teaching. Without the teaching, Borders became just another bookstore. Very large, very expensive, but still just a bookstore. By the mid-2000s, customer expectations had shifted. People expected the bookstores to work like the internet. Instant, searchable, personalized. They expected recommendations based on what they'd bought before. They expected to find anything immediately without asking a clerk. Borders had invented that experience in 1971, but now they couldn't deliver it online and were losing it in stores. The staff didn't have the data. The system wasn't learning. The magic was gone. The Amazon partnership, which had looked like efficiency in 2001, had become a trap. Borders had no e-commerce platform, no recommendation engine, no search capability, no customer behavior data, no learning loop. They had given it all to a partner who was also their largest competitor. And that competitor was getting smarter every day while Borders stood still. In 2007, Borders ended the partnership and tried to rebuild online discovery internally. 6 years too late. By then, Amazon had been learning for 13 years. Its algorithms could predict what you wanted before you searched for it. Its recommendations were eerily accurate. Its systems had seen billions of transactions. Discovery had evolved past search into prediction and anticipation. Borders had given them all of that information. And Borders, when they tried to restart, were starting from silence. While they tried to catch up online, the stores began to collapse. The stores, once discovery interfaces, physical expressions of databases knowledge, were now just buildings, high rent, declining foot traffic, competition from online retailers who didn't need showrooms. Borders tried everything. They expanded music sections, better cafes, more author events, loyalty programs. I think I still have my Borders card. Promotions, discounts, none of it mattered. The problem wasn't that Borders needed better stores. The problem was that Borders had forgotten what stores were for. The stores had never been destinations. They had been search terminals, physical access point to a discovery system. Once the discovery system was gone, the stores were just warehouses with coffee. The company hemorrhaged money. Store leases locked them into long-term premium commitments at premium rates. Roughly 70% of Borders locations competed directly with Barnes & Noble, which had kept its online operation in-house. Borders had also bet heavily on CDs and DVDs, just as iTunes, Netflix, and other streaming services made physical media obsolete. And the debt piled up. In February of 2011, Borders Group filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It's kind of sad. It's like 40 years on the dot. They tried to reorganize, tried to find a buyer, tried to save what was left. By July, the bidding deadline expired with no acceptable offers. The bankruptcy judge approved liquidation. On July 22, 2011, Borders began closing its remaining 399 stores. By September, every location was gone. $4 billion in annual revenue at peak, $2 billion in market cap, over 1,200 stores worldwide, almost 20,000 employees. Gone. The discovery problem Lewis and Tom solved in 1971, helping people find books in a world of overwhelming choice, still exists. Other companies own it now. Amazon, Google, Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, BookTalk. Algorithmic curation. Love that word. Discovery didn't disappear. Borders just stopped doing it. Borders going digital didn't kill Borders. Barnes & Noble survived. Independent bookstores survived. Physical book sales survived. People still buy books in stores today. What killed Borders was losing their axiom. The Axiom was lost the moment the brothers left. Not because the brothers were irreplaceable, but because they remembered what the database was for. It wasn't infrastructure or efficiency or back office support for retail. It was the whole point. When Kmart acquired Borders in 1992, they acquired a bookstore chain with impressive technology. They didn't realize they acquired a technology company that happened to use bookstores. Inside a retail empire, surrounded by people who managed stores and moved inventories and negotiated leases, the database faded into the background, became invisible. By the time the internet arrived, no one at Borders could see what Louis and Tom had seen in 1971. That discovery was the product. The computers made it possible. That the system wasn't supporting the stores. The stores were supporting the system. When Borders handed search to Amazon in 2001, it felt reasonable. Split the work. Amazon handles technology. Borders handles retail. Everyone profits. For a big box retailer, outsourcing technology made sense. But Borders had never been a big box retailer, and unlike big box retailers, books are really cheap to ship. You don't need a store. Borders had been an oracle that spoke through bookstores. Once the oracle went silent, all that was left were buildings full of books that people could find cheaper, faster, and better somewhere else. The Axiom was never written down. It was never in a mission statement or a corporate filing. Borders described itself as a bookseller, a retailer, a destination bookstore. It never called itself a discovery platform. It never called itself a technology company. It never said the computers were the point. So the spell was invisible. The magic lived in machines most people never saw. Customers saw the stores. Analysts saw the revenue. Investors saw the square footage. Nobody saw the database. So when the brothers left, the spell left with them. Not all at once. Louis was gone by 1988. The stores kept growing. Tom was gone by 95. The company went public. Revenue climbed to $4 billion a year. But the company had already forgotten what it was. The tools had changed, but the Axiom hadn't. Borders lost the Axiom, and the tools they had developed couldn't save them. And we all remember when they went out of business. Well, some of us remember. I'm old enough to remember. I loved Borders. Had a first date at Borders once, or second date, with someone very important to me. And so, yeah, Borders was a thing. And to see themselves get lost because they lost their Axiom breaks my heart. And that's a big part about why I do the work I do. But if you enjoyed this story and you learned anything from it, do feel free to give me a like and subscribe. You can check out some of my work at clarityprofessor.com, or you can sign up, again, to watch the live broadcast every week, Friday at 1 o'clock. Go to clarityspecialist.com, clarityspecialist.com. No long URLs, just there you go. And you can go ahead and sign up. You'll get an email reminder before it starts, then you can go there to watch it. So sign up today, and we will see you again. In the meantime, know your Axiom. Take care.
Amid the echoes of tradition, precision meets conversation. Welcome to the Clarity Professor Podcast.